Hey, this is RockMan. Welcome back to RockMan Reads a Freakin Book, where DK left off. Today I'll be reading chapters 39 through 41 of I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. I believe it was last time where I had trouble with a word. It's quirt, spelled Q-U-I-R-T. I looked it up. It is actually a short-handled riding whip with a braided leather lash. So what's-her-face, Tavira, was hitting people with some S&M riding crop, basically. That's what that is. So anyway, let's continue with chapter 39. The new raid promised to be easy and probably did not require the show of force we were going to haul along, but I hated it. Admiral Tavira had decided we were going to travel to the Algara system. We weren't going to hit the main world, Algara 2, even though the bureaucracy-bound planetary administration probably couldn't mount a defense. Instead, we were heading for the first world in the system, Keralit, a jungle world whose only colony was far from self-sufficient. It was this lack of self-sufficiency that made Keralit a prime target. The colony, Morimento, was home to one of the larger Kamasi remnant communities in the galaxy. Well back before I was born, right after the Clone Wars, the world of Kamas was brutally attacked and hit with enough firepower that vegetation boiled off the world, leaving it a dead rock, and the vast majority of the Kamasi dead with it. Because of the thoroughness and sheer ferocity of the attack, no one knew who had ordered it or carried it out, and no one knew why it had been carried out. For as long as anyone could remember, the Kamasi had been very pacifistic and the very soul of moderation and mediation, or meditation, one of those two. While a few Kamasi ventured forth as Jedi, obviously including my grandfather's friend, Yelnek Itkla, most who left Kamas did so as traders or scholars, negotiators, and diplomats. So beloved were they that various languages adopted the word Kamasi to mean friend from afar or stranger to be trusted. Factions within the Empire certainly did what they could to help the surviving Kamasi after the immolation of their world. A number of colonies like Morimento had been created, and those who were inclined to see conspiracies everywhere even went so far as to suggest Alderaan had been destroyed because it was home to one of the larger Kamasi refugee communities. I didn't know if that was true or not, but I could recall my mother collecting up old clothes for shipment to Kamasi camps elsewhere in the galaxy. With the defeat of the Empire, the charity continued and even swelled, which meant with a semi-annual shipment of supplies just having arrived on Keralit, the Kamasi colony became a ripe target for plunder. As we reverted to real space, we discovered we were not the only ones who found the Kamasi supplies a prize worth winning. We poured out of the Invidious and saw an old Koloth-class battlecruiser in orbit around Keralit. The IFF transponder indicated it was called Harm's Way, and I'd known of that ship from back in my Corsac days. It belonged to a group of Thalassian slavers who, even for slavers, had a pretty unsavory reputation. They culled the best and brightest of their victims and killed the rest, guaranteeing a diminished supply which hiked their prices. Bolts on me. We have their skulls. Burn 'em, don't shock. Rock, slash, head down and ground attack Thalassian ships. Use ion cannons. I don't want slave ships being blown up with slaves inside. Timzer and Wallen acknowledged my orders and headed to atmosphere while the rest of us came around to port and drove straight at the 24 Z-95 headhunters the Thalassians used. Fairly stock models with 2 triple blasters and a concussion missile launcher. The Thalassian pilots were not bad, but we were just better, a lot better. I nailed my first one in a head-to-head pass. I fired first, splashing his forward shield with laser light. He shied a bit and shot a concussive missile at me, but it jetted past harmlessly. My next 2 bolts punched through his shield. One drilled into the cockpit and the second melted part of the port engine. Bits and pieces of it broke loose, exploding out through the housing. Then the S-foil itself tore off and whirled away into space. The skull proceeded into a flat spin, and the pilot, if he still lived, was unable to do anything about it. The next pilot hit me once with red bursts from triple blasters, but my shields held. I shot back, hitting him with a dual-fire pair of laser blasts. He rolled to starboard to get away from me, so I rolled to port to drop in on his tail. I triggered another burst of fire that nibbled away at his aft shield, then inverted and climbed into his continued loop. He tried to roll to port and climb away from me, but a quick push of the stick forward and a touch of rudder brought me back on him. My last shots pierced his shields and, were he flying an X-Wing, would have decapitated his astromech. As it was in a skull, I took off his cockpit canopy and the top 10 centimeters of his helmet. Red blaster bolts shot past me off the starboard side. I popped my throttle offline and went bow down for 2 seconds, then throttled up again and ruddered to starboard. The skull that had been trying to slip in on my tail overshot me, giving me her belly as a clean target. I pumped 2 sets of bolts into it, collapsing the forward shield and taking the first third of the craft off. Unless the pilot was really good, all she'd be able to do was fly straight and level. That worked out, though, because down would bring her back to the dogfight, and up would carry her into the battle between the Harm's Way and the Invidious. But not for long. The Koloth battlecruiser had once been considered a very powerful ship, and this one had been modified enough to be able to fight any Nebulon B frigate to a standstill. In the hands of slavers, it made for a most potent weapon, and under normal circumstances would have been a welcome addition to the Invid fleet. However, the Thalassian slavers had tried to poach what Admiral Tavira saw as her property, and the price to be paid for that affront was very high. And even watching various sensor feeds well after the battle, I found it truly difficult to comprehend the vast destructive capabilities of the Invidious. While I knew how many guns the ship had and could easily describe the relative effects of each, watching them employed in so efficient and lethal a manner left me emotionally numb. The Harm's Way got off the first salvo, spraying laser cannon and turbolaser fire over the length of the Invidious. A few shots made it through the Star Destroyer's shields to boil off hull armor, but I'd seen nastier damage done by an X-Wing strafing run. The Harm's Way's gunners didn't concentrate their fire to compound the damage being done. Their tactics might have worked in the past to frighten off a ship with which they were more evenly matched, but not the Invidious. And not with Admiral Tavira commanding. The Invidious return barrage devastated the ship that was 1/5 of the Star Destroyer's size. The heavy turbolaser batteries concentrated their fire on the aft end of the battlecruiser, punching through the shields as if they were mere holograms, then boiling great holes through the hull. Atmosphere vented, carrying with it debris and bodies, then subsidiary explosions rocked more shrapnel and parts into space. The Invidious's emerald heavy turbo-laser cannon shots raked the battlecruiser's starboard flank, drilling through shields and burning off the Harm's Way's weaponry. With no shields and no weapons, the battlecruiser's commander did the only thing left open to him. He rolled his ship to present the belly shields and tried to pull away and run. In his case, however, there was no try and there was no do. There was only die, and the battlecruiser died spectacularly. As the aft came around, the Invidious hit it with everything. The Harm's Way's aft looked like a black hole, sucking in every green energy shaft the Invidious's guns spat out. The battlecruiser's engines exploded immediately, shredding the last third of the ship. The roiling golden ball of incandescent gas actually pushed the Harm's Way further on the captain's intended course, but by then it was only the spasmodic jerking of a corpse. The Invidious's guns poured through the battlecruiser's hulk, melting everything. Molten durasteel congealed into long twisted threads that trailed from the wreck like the roots of a nebula orchid. I actually thought I saw, and confirmed by later sensor data review, turbolaser bolts burning through the battlecruiser's nose. More metal tendrils bled out from the ship's bow. Then the hollowed hull sagged in on itself. What was once the Harm's Way hung there in space, like the carcass of some odd metallic animal. I rolled the clutch and streaked back into the dogfight, but the Thalassians were broken. Half their fighters had already been destroyed, and watching the death of the Harm's Way had taken the fight out of the rest of them. The trio whose skulls could jump peeled off into an exit vector, while the rest of them headed out towards Algera II. Why they thought they would find sanctuary there, I had no idea, but whatever they would face there likely beat the death we'd give them. Let them run, bolts. We're going atmosphere and see if there's anything to do down there. My clutch broke through the planet's cloud cover first, giving me a good view of the planet's verdant jungles. From several points to the north, I could see smoke and orbiting clutches that occasionally swooped and fired. I punched up Rock Squadron's tactical frequency on the comm. This is Bolt Leader. Rock Lead report. Rock Lead here. Little bit of ground fire. We have a shocked shuttle. Slaves have escaped into the jungle and we're driving the Thalassians away from them. Good work, Timzer. I raised Slash Squadron and got a similar report. I brought my clutch around on a southern heading and did a flyby on the main Morimento district that included the spaceport, but saw no ships and encountered no fire. I switched back to Bolt Squadron's tactical frequency. 3 flight, land here. 2 flight, combat aerospace patrol. 1 flight on me, sensors in ground search mode. I worked my sensor controls over into ground search mode, which painted a grid on my monitor, superimposed a topographical map of the terrain, and started to fill in data on structures, energy flow patterns, life form readings, movement, and anything else the programmers had thought important. I fed the resulting data over to my comm unit and shot it up to the Invidious. A red light on the comm unit burned to life beside the fleet frequency. I punched it. Bolt Lead here. Bolt Lead, this is Admiral Tavira. Ground status. Scanning the town now. Looks like the warehouses are loaded. If you send our assault shuttles down now, we can start loading. I glanced at the sensor monitor and the data that was scrolling across it. Warehouse district appears to be largely deserted. The Kamasi must have headed home when the trouble started. Let them stay there and they need not be hurt. My thoughts exactly. Well, not exactly. Taking the supplies and equipment from the warehouses could set back the development of the colony by years. The Kamasi were known to be industrious, but taming a world is not an easy task. With the proper tools, they could have done a lot, so the harm we would do them might not be immediate, but it would hurt. I am so pleased you approve. Tavira out. I switched back to Bolt's tactical frequency. 3 flight, report on spaceport status. I got no reply, which struck me as odd. This is Bolt Lead to 3 flight, report status. Again, no reply. Bolt 2 on me, 3 and 4, continue scanning. I rolled my clutch and headed back toward the spaceport, keeping my sensors in ground mode to pick up on any ground fire that could indicate a running light fight or ambush of my pilots. The last thing I wanted was for Remar to get killed because I'd ordered him to the ground, since I knew I'd pay dearly for spoiling his long-awaited assignation with Admiral Tavira. Ground scan came up negative, though it did show all 4 clutches of 3 flight on the ground and intact. I'm not liking this too. Stay up and keep orbiting. I'm going down. I set the clutch down, popped the hatch, then doffed my gloves and helmet. I took the comm link from the helmet and checked to make sure it was tuned to the squadron frequency. I clipped that to my red flight suit lapel, then pushed a blaster carbine and a belt of power packs from the survival box. I hauled myself out of the cockpit, slid down the front, and hit the ground running. I headed toward the spaceport terminal building, and when I saw blaster scars on the door lock, I got a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Realizing I was taking a risk, I tapped into my personal force reservoir and pushed my sphere of responsibility out. I consciously flattened it, making it more into a fat disc in the hopes that Tavira's advisors wouldn't pick up on it. Then I focused it even more forward, ignoring the spaceport landing facilities. Keeping it in a semicircle, I pushed it out and sensed nothing in the terminal. In the jungle beyond it, I found all manner of life forms in various Kamasi homes. Then, at a distance that would have covered roughly 2 Coruscant blocks, I found my pilots. Along with them, I caught pain and fear, but it didn't come from them. I started sprinting and rounded a corner along a paved path that followed the gentle rolling lay of the land to a circle in an area where the trees had been thinned so homes could be built. Remart and his flightmates stood in the center of the clearing with a semicircle of Kamasi looking on with horror in their wide dark eyes. A land speeder rested on the ground between most of the Kamasi and my people, with 2 dead Thalassians still seated in it. A third Thalassian, the driver, lay on the ground. Across from him lay a Kamasi who had risen up on one elbow, with his left arm held up to ward off a blow from Remart. Behind that Kamasi crouched another Kamasi, smaller and fine-boned. I guessed she was a female, and perhaps even an adolescent because of the slight swell of down-covered breasts. The purple markings on the face and shoulders of both Kamasi were similar enough that I assumed some sort of blood relation between them. Report, Sasryu. I put a lot of venom and all of the command I could muster into my voice. Now, report. Remart's head came up, and he came around to face me. His flightmates spread out, each one of them finger each one of them fingering the blaster carbines they wore slung over their shoulders or across their bellies. I looked at each one of them, but they didn't hold my gaze very long. When I looked at Remart, he smiled confidently. Situation is under control, Captain. It doesn't concern you. I continued trotting forward. Is that so? I glanced at the downed Kamasi and saw a dark dribble of blood from one of his nostrils. I gave him a quick nod, then narrowed my eyes. Explain to me what is going on here. I said it was none of your concern. Noted. Make it my concern. As I approached them, I slowed and noticed a couple of details I missed from further out. The dead driver had spilled a satchel of jewelry when he went down. I'd never seen Kamasi metalwork before, and the silver and gold pieces lying there were utterly unlike anything I'd ever looked at. I had no reason to suspect the slaver had brought the jewelry with him for trading purposes. Since none of the Kamasi I could see were wearing anything beyond sandals and a kilt-like garment, my assumption was that the Thalassians had been looting this small neighborhood when Remart and his people happened upon them and killed them. Remart's face closed up. We found the Thalassians here. They resisted and attacked us, and as per regulations, we killed them. End of report. I nodded at the Kamasi on the ground. What happened to him? He struck me, so I hit him back. I frowned. What sort of Sith spawn reason did you have for being out here anyway? The man smiled slyly, and I saw his friends begin to grin too. I was shopping for something for the Admiral. So you thought you'd just come along and loot a house or two, but you found the Thalassians here already. You killed them and you decided to take their swag. I stared at him incredulous. And this Kamasi didn't want to give it up, right? We just wanted him to share. Sure, but the only thing you know about sharing comes under the heading communicable disease. I frowned. What made you think you had any right to that jewelry? Remart looked at me as if I were stupid. We're pirates. We take stuff like jewelry. Right, but all the stuff we take goes into a communal pool and is split up later. You know that. I shook my head. Just because Admiral Tavira has lost her mind doesn't mean rules no longer apply to you. Oh, really? I nodded. Really? Good then, I'll apply some rules. He brought his blaster carbine up and pointed at the Kamasi male he'd hit. This one hit me. He was resisting, so I get to kill him. Nope. No, Remart's eyes narrowed. Being selective about regulations now, aren't you, Captain? Hardly. I pointed at the Kamasi with my left hand. He's mine. You can't kill him. The pilot frowned. He's yours? Right. I need a body servant, and I want him to fulfill that role. You can't kill him. I watched Remart's anger rise to his face. And that's an order, Sasryu. Remart shifted his shoulders. I don't think I like your orders. And I think you could be shot down right now and we could tell everyone that the Thalassians ambushed you while you were bravely leading us on a recon of this area. I think I could even get elected to lead Bolt Squadron in your place. That's possible, but it won't give you what you really want. I tossed my blaster carbine down and the belt of power packs with it. Even if I die here, even if you cover it with that story, everyone will remember two things. One, I was in the lead, and two, they'll remember I said you hit like a Chandra fan. You'll never live that down unless... I shook my hands out and waved him forward with my fingertips. Try me. Beat me down with your fists. Of course, I don't think you have the guts to do that, since I'm not harmless. Care to prove me wrong? Remart laughed aloud and tossed his carbine to his wingman. Oh, I've been waiting for this chance. You suckered me in the dark, Adanian. It's a good day for bone-breaking and blood-spilling. You're mine. His first punch came in high, a right hand hooking down toward his left. I stepped away from it easily, then leaned in, grabbed the back of his gray flight suit, and tossed him to the ground. He rolled on his shoulder and came up, spinning fast to face me, his arms ready to pick off any punch or kick I might be throwing at him. I remained where I was and laughed. I told you before, you get one free punch. You missed, so I'll only count it as half. How's that? He approached me more carefully, keeping his feet solidly under him. He came in with his left fist forward, his right cocked to deliver a heavy punch. He led with a short jab from his left hand, but I merely had to lean my head away to avoid it. He stepped in to deliver the right, so I cut to my right, and his punch sailed over my left shoulder. As I came around beneath his retracting left arm, I leaped up and caught him on the side of his face with an open-handed slap that twisted him around and dropped him to one knee. He covered the red imprint of his cheek with his own hand, then spat on the ground. Remart rose slowly and set himself to continue the fight. Is that your best, Adanian? Just warming up. As he set himself for my attack, I saw the myriad of counter moves he ran through his mind. Unlike Tycho, Remart did not think in complicated lines. He evaluated and rejected attacks not based on what I could deliver, but on what he could best attack back from. He looked to defend himself against blows he hoped I would throw. And apparently he never truly got the idea that I had no intention of making his dreams come true. I snapped a kick out with my right foot that caught him on his left kneecap. It drove the knee back until it locked, but didn't break it because I'd already begun to retract my foot. As he began to stumble back, my foot flicked out again, catching him squarely in the stomach. His eyes bulged, and a strangled groan burst from his mouth as he fell and vomited. Hey, you do have guts. I left him on the ground, walked over to the bag of jewelry, and squatted beside it. The pieces in it looked very beautiful, both delicate and yet possessed of a sinewy strength that matched the Kamasi people. You were willing to oppose Rimart for these pieces. Why? The Kamasi looked from me to where Rimart was slowly gathering himself to his feet and back again. These are heirlooms. Our families were destroyed on Kamas, and these are the physical memories we have of them. He pointed to one particular piece, a necklace, with interlaced cat-like figures, each with a tiny gold stone as an eye. My daughter, she asked for that piece to be returned. Your man demanded something of her in exchange, and sought it when she refused. I tossed the piece to the Kamasi crouched next to her father, then stood and walked back toward where Rimart was bent over holding his belly. I knew he was trying to sucker me in, so I feinted, taking one more step forward, and stopped. He lunged forward, trying to tackle me, so I slipped to the left and drove my right fist solidly in on his right ear. The punch dropped him to the ground cleanly, and I heard his teeth click as his chin hit first. I kicked him solidly in the ribs, then backed away, sucking at my torn knuckles. That was for even thinking about imposing yourself on her. I walked back over and picked up the rest of the jewelry. I tossed the bag to one of the Kamasi in the crowd. Make sure the pieces get back to whom they belong. Remart's wingman, Doberty, groaned. Captain, that's our stuff. Not anymore. I turned around again to see Remart coming up into a crouch. You want to come to me, or do I come to you? He came running. His arms hooked out like horns, looking to catch me, grapple me, carry me to the ground. In close wrestling like that, his size gave him an advantage, and he wanted to use it. He could hurt me badly doing that, so I didn't feel inclined to play along with him. I let him get in close, then I began to fall back before his attack. As his arms closed around me, I grabbed the front of his flight suit and pulled. Rolling back, I posted my right foot in his stomach. As we rocked back on my spine, I extended my leg, pitching him into the air and over my head. He hit hard, driving the Kamasi and his daughter off to my left and further away from their own people. Before Remark could get up and lunge at them, I closed with him and grabbed a handful of hair to help him up. He started to turn toward me, so I let go of his hair and caught him with a roundhouse left that shattered his nose. He reeled away, but I kept after him, burying my right fist in his stomach, then clipping him with a left on the side of his head again. That punch landed like a hammer on an anvil and didn't do the anvil or the hammer any good. I felt a pop in my left hand and I knew I'd broken something, but despite the pain, I didn't care. A short jab to the mouth mashed Remart's lips and tumbled a couple of teeth free. His hands rose to his face, came away bloody, then he stared at me for a moment as if he couldn't believe what was happening. His mouth gaped open with surprise, so I closed it for him with a sharp jab that staggered him and sent him to the ground. Remart lay there for a second, spitting out bloody saliva on a tooth. He swore, spraying blood over the green grass, then looked past me. Don't just stand there, Nerf brains. You have blasters. Shoot him. I spun, hoping I could touch the force and absorb the bolts, but I never even got a chance to begin to concentrate. Blue lightning wreathed each man, one after another, starting them jerking and dancing as if puppets controlled by a spastic droid. Their blasters hit the ground right before they did, and the bleeding Kamasi kept my blaster on them. I turned for one last time to Remart. You don't know it, but you've had quite enough. I leaped above the feeble kick he aimed at my legs, then snapped a kick to the side of his head. He flopped back on the ground, and I prepared to kick him again, but a hissed gasp from the Kamasi stopped me. I stared at Remart for a second and could feel my hands swelling. I flicked the blood off my right hand, then realized I'd spattered the young Kamasi female. I looked to apologize to her, read the horror in her eyes, then my gaze drifted beyond her to where her father stood holding my blaster carbine on me. Thanks for protecting me. I opened my palms toward him. Couldn't blame you if you shot me. In your place, I probably would. That is entirely possible. The Kamasi shrugged his shoulders easily, lowered the carbine, then twisted it around to present the stock to me. Among the Kamasi, however, a body servant does not shoot his master. I wasn't serious about that. I said that just to prevent him from killing you. The Kamasi's blue on green eyes sparkled. This I know, but I am serious about it. You put your life in jeopardy to protect mine, much as I did to protect my daughter and these my friends. So you should stay with them. I cannot, for to do so would be to put you in jeopardy. He blinked his big eyes and raised a three-fingered hand. You told these men that you were taking me as your servant, which action precipitated this fight. Your man violated an order from which your authority to discipline him arose. If you do not take me as your servant, then there was no justification, and he and his friends will be free to fabricate a story that will destroy you. By going with you, I am proof of your story. My eyes narrowed. And what of the tale they will tell about the jewelry? We are all that remains of a peaceful people who had their world destroyed. Who would believe we have anything of value? With his right hand he indicated his people. I am Eligos Akla. Trust stand for this domain of Morimento. All I have of value is these people, and I believe by protecting you, I can protect them. His words, carried in a somber but rich and sincere voice, made a lot of sense. Still, I didn't like the idea of taking him with me into the Survivor Society. Even under my protection, Corcus was no place for a civilian. I do not want to take you away from your daughter. Eligos shook his head. We are Kamasi. We understand well the pain of losing kin, and how to ease that pain. She will not be alone. I nodded and accepted the blaster carbine from him. I turned and fired one stun bolt into Remart, then lowered the weapon again. Looks like I have a body servant. I'll be at the spaceport. You have an hour to say your farewells. If you don't make it on time and get left behind, I'll understand. The Kamasi graced me with a warm smile. An hour. I will be punctual. I started to trudge down the path to the spaceport and work my comlink into my left hand. This is Bolt Leader. When we have a chance, I need some pilots to de-dirt some clutches, and I'll need some evac of downed men. Someone at Fleet replied after only a couple of seconds' delay. You have trouble down there, Bolt Leader? A bit. I sucked at a knuckle. Nothing I couldn't handle, though. Chapter 40. Some of the Invidious's internal security officers came down with the evac shuttle, separated Eligos, me, and the four of my men who had gone down. Once we got back to the Star Destroyer, I was placed in a small wardroom and interrogated. I told him the full story about finding Remart looting the dead Thalassians, our disagreement about the fate of the Kamasi and the subsequent fight. I eliminated any mention of the Kamasi jewelry, and instead suggested Remart had been angry that the Kamasi had nothing for him to take. I knew Remart and his cronies would spin the story differently. I counted upon the idea that no pirate would give loot back to people, to give my fiction about the lack of loot the stamp of truth. Their counterclaims would simply seem like a trumped-up story to get me in trouble. The interrogation lasted for a couple of hours, during which time my hands stiffened up, the blood on them crusted, and the broken bones in my left hand began to throb rather fiercely. The interrogators knew I was in pain and kept promising I'd have medical attention once I'd clear up a few details. Having conducted numerous interrogations myself, I knew what they wanted to hear, how they wanted to hear it, so I gave it to them. Finally, they walked away, apparently satisfied with what I had told them. After they left, a 2-1B droid came in and examined my hands. It noted that I'd broken 2 bones in my left hand and had a lot of edema in both hands, as well as cuts and abrasions. It set the broken bones, and was a bit more gentle about it than Mara Jade had been, but informed me that I'd not be getting access to the Bacta tanks on the ship because I was not sufficiently injured. While it would not give me details on what had happened, from the nature and number of injuries it described, I gathered some Thalassians must have ambushed one of our looting parties, or someone triggered a booby trap, which accounted for all the people using the tanks before me. The droid withdrew, and Eligos came into the room with bandages, some salves, water, and sponges to clean up my hands. Though I am not formally a healer, one learns to deal with wounds like these when building a settlement. Carving on a new life is bound to give anyone new skills. I smelled carefully, a bit surprised by the Kamasi's scent. I found it slightly spicy and woody, almost like Corellian whiskey, but a touch sweeter, reminding me of warm beverages my mother would make for us when the family would huddle together during winter nights. I found the scent comforting, and something that seemed to make the small gray room in which we stood less oppressive. Sitting on the room's table, I looked up into Eligos's eyes as he cleaned the blood from my right hand. I have a question for you. I will do my best to answer it. When I arrived on the scene down there, you were on the ground, bleeding from the nose. Remart said you'd hit him, but from here, feeling the strength in your hands, looking at your musculature, I know that's not true. You are not that far removed physiologically speaking, from Selonians that I believe Remart would have been left standing if you'd hit him. Eligos cocked his head slightly to the right. I tapped him on the shoulder, wishing to thank him. I believe I surprised him with my approach, which is why he turned and struck me. But if you had wanted to, you could have snapped his neck with a single blow, couldn't you? Eligos's brow furrowed, then he looked down into the basin of bloody water. For Kamasi, momentous events produce memories that are very striking in detail. You might consider them holographic, but they are more to us, almost tangible. To have that sort of memory of killing someone, no matter the reason, is a terrible burden to bear. Such a memory would not fade with time, and would become a heavy burden indeed. Because of such things, we have always sought to promote peace and understanding, harmony and unity. I nodded, and that's why you stunned instead of killed the others down there. Eligos straightened up. I thought I had killed them. I stunned them because you had left the blaster sit on stun. I could not have let them kill you, and would have accepted the burden of such memories in your defense. That surprised me a bit. So, when you held the blaster on me, you thought a shot would kill me. He bowed his head forward. Until you took the weapon and shot Remart, I thought the men I had shot were dead. It was only when you shot a man you could have easily beaten to death that I realized the men I shot were merely sleeping. Now that you know they live, will that memory fade? Kamasi gave me an enigmatic smile. Flesh tightened around his eyes, sharpening the purple striping that rayed out from their corners. I will keep it intact for other reasons, I think. He started to shift over to work on my left hand when Admiral Tavira entered the room and shoved him away. She grabbed my left hand and caught the broken bones in a pincer grip. I am not pleased at all with you, Genosudanian, not at all. I locked my jaw so I would not cry out as she tightened her grip. Through clenched teeth I said, I am sorry to hear that, Admiral. She released my hand and raked a stare over me. You look a mess. I snorted. You should see the other guy. I have, damn you. Her expression went from angry to something colder and brought a smile with it. You administered quite a beating to Remart, and why? She flicked a hand out, thumping it off Eligos's breastbone. For this piece of alien meat, why? I gave her a cold stare. I needed a servant, nothing more. Fire flared in her eyes. You needed a goad to use on Remart. She folded her arms across her chest. You are so easy to read, Adanian. I know you too well. Do you? My guts began to churn for reasons I could not identify. I should apologize to you for spoiling your fun, I suppose, but I saw no reason to let Remart murder someone who had done nothing. Remart said this one struck him. I frowned at her. Remart has said nothing to you. He's still got to be in a back-to-tank. Another couple of hours and you're totally fine. You can speak to him then. She shook her head, her hair brushing over her shoulders and breasts like liquid shadow. He's beyond speaking. What? Her cruel smile reappeared. He's dead. I shook my head. Not possible. I didn't hit him that hard. She laughed. Such concern over someone you clearly hated. No, you did not kill him. Tavira paused for a moment and stepped in closer to me, leaning forward with a hand pressed to the table on the other side of my hips. Her words came as whispers, her breath on my left cheek coming warm and gentle, in sharp contrast to what she said. I had him shot. He was insubordinate. He disobeyed an order and struck a superior officer. He had to die, and you knew he would the moment you goaded him into that fight, didn't you? I pulled my head back, leaving a centimeter of space between our noses. If I'd wanted him dead, I'd have done the job myself. That may have been what you were thinking, Genos, but I know better. Your heart knows better. She moved her head forward until her nose barely bumped mine. She smelled of flowers, musky flowers, with a hint of a nebulous orchid sweetness underneath it all. You wanted him dead, and you wanted me to kill him, to punish me for selecting him after you rejected me. Wrong. She straightened up, raised her right hand, and traced her index finger along my jaw, starting at my right ear. You blondes always cause so much trouble. Everyone assumes you are stupid, but that's because they cannot fathom the complexity of your thoughts. Perhaps even you cannot. As her finger came around, she caught my goatee between it and her thumb, giving it a tug that was decidedly ungentle. You knew I had chose him because I knew he was a rival of yours. His hatred of you was quite pathological, as was your hatred of him. At heart, though, you were very much alike. The confrontation was expected, and I knew you would be the victor. I stared deep into her eyes. Then why didn't you prevent it? I wanted to see how you would get rid of him. Her smile broadened. If you were a coward, you would have given him impossible assignments that would have gotten him killed. I did not expect that of you. I felt a thrill run through me as she spoke. What did you expect? I expected you to let him trap himself as he did. Devere leaned forward again and licked my left cheek teasingly. I didn't expect you to make me kill him. I thought you would present his body to me as proof you were his superior. Trapping me the way you did, you sought to prove you were my superior as well. I kept my voice even. You may choose to believe that, if you wish. She laughed and backed a step away, then tucked her black hair behind her left ear. And you may choose to believe that is not what you intended. She licked her lips, and I felt the heat of her lust radiating from her. So, you forced me to destroy my diversion, leaving me with the need for a replacement. I think I will have you become my new diversion. I held my hands up. I won't be diverting anyone for days. And you will want to use those days to figure out how to escape me, won't you? She shook her head. I know your tragic tale of a lover lost and your revenge plotted. I know what you desire. I am not a stupid woman. I could compel your attendance by my side by simply threatening to have the survivors wiped out. I could threaten your servant here, and you would do what I want, but that is not enough. So this is what I tell you, Genocidanian. You know you want me, and you know I want you. I know you want to destroy the Tintaline and reclaim the lover denied to you. I will even allow you to do that, putting the Invidious and all my resources at your disposal. All you have to do is agree to come to me of your own free will. You will enjoy my company, and I assure you that you will very much enjoy it. You will come here to the Invidious, and I will make you my consort. Through me, your goals would be accomplished. Leonia Tavira smiled, then stepped forward one last time. She took my jaw in her hands and pulled my mouth to hers. Her tongue played across my lips, then she kissed me fully and deeply. I wanted to tell myself that I didn't thrust her away because of the injuries to my hands, but I knew that wasn't the truth. The thrill I had felt before exploded inside of me, running from my loins to my brain and back down, rendering my pain insignificant. I found my nose full of her scent and could feel each strand of her hair that lashed gently against my cheeks. The injuries to my hands were the reason I did not pull her closer. My face burned as she pulled away, a victorious smile on her face. She glanced at Eligos. Take good care of him. I will call upon him in a month for his decision, and if he is not healed, I will return to Carolit and sterilize the planet. She kissed her fingers and pressed them against my lips. A month, then all you desire in your heart and mind will be yours for the taking. She swept from the room, and a few seconds after her departure, the fire in my lungs reminded me that breathing was indeed a necessary part of my continued existence. I greedily sucked in air and snorted it back out, trying to clear her perfume from my nose. I did my best to ball my left fist and smack it against the table, but Eligos caught my wrist and stopped me from doing that as easily as a parent curbing a child's tantrum. He didn't say anything, but just started washing my left hand. The sting of water and the rasp of the sponge over torn flesh helped bring me back into myself. I wanted to apply a quick Jedi calming technique, but to do so would betray me to Tavira's advisors. Using such a technique also required more composure than I could muster at the moment. There was no denying that I was attracted to Tavira. It was a physical thing, an animal thing, a magnetic attraction of one meat machine to another. I wanted to think of it on that plane alone, as if I were betrayed by that crude matter that trapped my spirit, but I knew that wasn't the whole story either. There was something in her spirit that I found intriguing. I told myself that what drew me to her was situational, like my attraction to Seol Tinta or Wedge's attraction to Kui. Still, I found something about Tavira absolutely fascinating, which made it difficult to deny the enticement of the flesh. What disturbed me more than my feeling of being drawn to her was her analysis of why I hated Remard and why I had done to him what I had. Even when describing the fight to my interrogators, I denied the detail of the damage I had inflicted on him. Kicking him in the stomach, smashing his face, all of that was certainly one way to win a fight with him, but I'd been trained in much quicker and more effective ways to deal with someone like him. Even in our first encounter, a shot to the throat had backed him off. That same blow, delivered more forcefully, could have crushed his windpipe and killed him without a fraction of the damage I'd done to him. I looked at my hands and knew I could have easily put him down without cutting myself and breaking bones. I'd known forever that hitting someone in the face was a great way to break a hand, but I did it anyway. I'd hit him there to punish him, and I'd hit him to punish myself. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the beating I gave him was wrong. I couldn't stop myself, so I made myself pay. Tavira suggested that I'd hated Remart so much because we were so much alike. I couldn't believe that, but cold assessment showed me her comparison wasn't terribly flawed. The necessities of the pirate society had brought out my worst traits. I'd allowed my arrogance and cockiness to run away with me and bring me down to the invid's level. Remart is what I would have been had I fallen with the survivors and not the rebellion. A chill ran down my spine. It would have been so simple, too, because the survivors loved the Empire no more than I did when I was on the run. Given no place to hide, I could have easily joined them to strike back at the Empire. Had I not been in a position to eventually join the rebellion when I ran from Corellia, I might have ended up with the survivors. Without a moral compass, I would have fallen into the savage and brutal society with absolute abandon, thriving amid the scum that I used to hunt. I'd not have been Tavira's consort. She would have been mine. I hissed, more at the realization than the sting of the unguent Eligos applied to my hands. I would have been a terror, a Garm Bel Iblis, carrying on my own war with the Empire, but without Bel Iblis's nobility to guide my hand. The whole of the galaxy would have been arrayed against me, and I would have destroyed them all. I would have become what Exar Kun offered to make me. No, Eligos smiled. The dressing will help the healing, master. Not that, I frowned, and don't call me master. Genos will work, captain if you want to be formal. Very well, Captain. Eligos elevated my right hand and started to wrap it in a steroplast. I sighed and let him work. I knew I had been jealous of Remart, and I beat him in a manner such that I destroyed his physical appeal. As nearly as I could sort out, Tavira had been right. I beat him to spoil her fun and punished her for choosing him over me. Even accepting that, I knew I'd not let Remart live just so she could kill him. I had not expected that to happen. She was morally bankrupt enough to transform mercy on my part into lethal trickery. I knew others would believe as she did, Kate and Timzer, who probably knew me better than anyone else in the Invids, would clearly accept me being that devious. But I didn't do that. I couldn't, I frowned. Could I? I shivered again and felt an icy viper wriggle through my guts. I could have, definitely. I clung to the fact that I knew I hadn't. But now I had a new dilemma to face. Tavira had given me a month to decide if I would become her consort. I would be taken aboard the Invidious. I would become part of the crew. I would have her confidence. I would be able to learn all of the Invid secrets, and I would even learn where Mirax was held. I would have everything I wanted, my wife back, and the means to destroy the Invids. In other undercover operations I'd worked before, the delicate matter of physical intimacy with subjects of the investigation had come up, and had been handled in a variety of ways. Sometimes another Corsic member, like Ayala, would be brought in to play the role of wife or girlfriend. Other times, when going out with a gang and being paired off with someone in the group, getting them drunk enough to incapacitate them, or feigning being that drunk myself, provided a way out. Yet other times, claiming to have a girlfriend who knew nothing of my criminal activity would be enough to get folks to leave me alone. But there were occasions where a cover story did not suffice. All operatives were told that they needn't do anything they objected to on a moral or philosophical basis, and we were given assignments that would put the least amount of stress upon us in that regard. But there were times when sleeping with someone was the logical next step in deepening a relationship that would allow the investigation to go further. While I was not wholly comfortable in such situations, neither did I see sex between consenting adults as forbidden unless sanctioned by marriage. Mirax and I had enjoyed each other's company well before we were married, and she was not the first woman I'd ever taken to bed. The few times during investigations when I had slept with a subject were different for me because, in those situations, I had no steady relationship with anyone else. I had no external ties, no understandings or vows that I would be breaking by sleeping with someone. And it struck me that while such connections would have given me another level of concern, they might not have stopped me. Mirax was my wife, with whom I had been entirely faithful, yet Tavira was the most direct course to obtaining Mirax's freedom. It would not be as if I were to fall in love with Tavira. That would not be possible. Physically, I might be with her, but emotionally I would have no connection. I would give her what she wanted to put myself in position to get what I wanted. It would be an alliance of convenience, letting me correct the injustice that had been done to my wife. It would be so simple. All I would do would be to be with Tavira, to please her and deceive her. She would lead me to my wife, and I would even deny Tavira that with which she would most want, my devotion. That would be the goal she had in mind, and I would not surrender that to her. She could have my body, and together I had no doubts we would discover and explore vast galaxies of passion, but she would never quite get all that she wanted from me. All those thoughts coursing through my brain seemed so obvious and so right, but something screamed in horror at the idea of giving in to them. What would be so easy to do, what would bring me closer, faster to Mirax than anything I'd done so far, would somehow also be wrong. I didn't know why. I didn't want to believe it. I even wanted to say the transgression there would be insignificant compared to the good that resulted. My alliance with Tavira would be only one way. I would get from her what I wanted and deny her the prize she most desired. That was what I would do, and any protest could be damned for being weak. I shivered. I can't believe I'm thinking this. Eligos tore and knotted off the Steroplast bandages on my right hand. What is that, Captain? I shook my head. Things I'm considering. Things I must do, but things I almost can't believe I'm thinking. I can't be thinking them. The Kamasi nodded slowly. If you'll permit me, we Kamasi have a saying. Yes? He pressed his hands together contemplatively. If the wind no longer calls to you, it is time to see if you have forgotten your name. The simple saying hit me like a hammer and found echoes in my father's old adage about not recognizing the man in the mirror. I began to tremble. You're right, I no longer know who I am. Chapter 41. Then I would suggest it is time you begin to remember. I laughed, easier said than done. He shook his head and began rapping my left hand. Not at all. Start from where you are and trace your steps backward until you recognize the last place you knew yourself. While his advice seemed deceptively naive, something in his voice also suggested it was the only possible solution to my quandary. I applied myself to the task, but zeroed in on a shortcut. A liaison with Tavira would be the fastest route to rescuing Mirax, but part of me knew it was wrong. I knew the part of me that opposed the plan bitterly would be a stepping stone back to myself, so I grappled with the reason why accepting Tavira's offer would be wrong. The answer smashed me in the face and left me aghast I'd avoided seeing it. The choice was wrong because I wouldn't be sleeping with Tavira for Mirax's sake. I'd be sleeping with her because I wanted to. I was letting the ends justify the means. I was able to wrap up a selfish desire in all sorts of noble and selfless reasons, but the reality was that Tavira's attraction to me pleased me. I felt flattered. I'd been married to Mirax for just shy of 4 years and never had the desire to be with another woman, but that didn't mean I didn't want to be thought of as attractive. And Tavira was a desirable woman who could have had any hundreds of men. So for her to choose me, well, that was very special. And for me to have the chance to prove she had chosen correctly, that I was indeed someone very special, that was a meal that could gorge my hut-like ego. It was of the dark side. Those words echoed through my brain in Master Skywalker's voice, and my understanding of the dark side expanded exponentially. Exar Kun and Darth Vader and the Emperor had made the dark side seem so dynamic and powerful that recognizing it and refusing it became easy. Here in the Invid society, where people acted more like beasts than they did civilized creatures, the line of demarcation between good and evil was not so much blurred as it didn't always run straight. Each situation had to be approached a little differently, and adjustments had to be made by degrees, or falling over to the dark side became almost casual. In the beating I had administered to Remart, I probably stepped over the line. I had been working in defense of Eligos, his daughter, his people, and even myself. Had I tapped the Force to strengthen me in that fight, I would have been pulling through power dark and terrible. I would have done to Remart things that all the Bacta in the galaxy could not have made right, and reveled in his screams as I did it. I would have swept Tavira away. I would have won Mirax her freedom, but only at the expense of all we had ever had together. I frowned and looked up at Eligos. It all comes down to the nature of evil, doesn't it? Evil is selfishness, while good is selfless. If I take an action that benefits me, only me, and hurts others, I am evil. If I do what must be done to prevent harm to others, if I become the buffer between them and evil, then my actions will be good. The Kamasi canted his head to the left. Your intentions will be good. Without consideration and forethought, however, your actions could still be evil. That is the problem, of course. Evil is always easy, and resisting it is never so. Evil is relentless, and anyone, if they tire, if they are not vigilant, can fall prey to it. My scowl deepened. And there are situations where opposing evil may result in harm coming to the innocent. It does happen, yes. He blinked his big eyes, then settled his hands on my shoulders. Life is not without pain, but life concerns itself with how we handle that pain, or joy, or confusion, or triumph. Life is more than time passing before death. It is the sum and total of all we make of it. Decisions may not be easy, but many is the time when not making decision, not taking action is worse than a poor decision. Evil flourishes where it is not opposed, and those who are able to oppose it must to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I threw my head back and laughed aloud. Eligos watched me with a puzzled expression on his face. I did not think what I was saying was particularly humorous. It wasn't. It's just that I've heard those words before, from my family and friends and even myself. I smiled at him. When you introduced yourself to me, you said you were a trustant of your people. That is a position of responsibility and trust? The Kamasi nodded solemnly. It is most highly regarded among our people. And do I have your trust? You do. So I can trust you in all things to help me. Eligos again nodded. I will not be a servant of evil. That makes two of us, I nodded to him. When we get home, I will tell you more. He pressed his hands together again. I look forward then to journey's end. Thanks for fixing my hands and my head. The pleasure was all mine. I twisted around and lay back on the table, hooking my heels on its edge and letting my hands rest like lumps of lead on my chest. And having quoted back to me things my father and grandfather had said, things I had heard Wedge say, and things I told myself and others, I realized who I was. I saw my reflection in the mirror and heard the wind call to me. I had, since before I could remember remembering, always held as the highest possible ideal a commitment to serving others. What I wanted was subordinate to what was good for everyone else. My job was to provide others shelter and shade, to be a fortress against all of the cruelty and wantonness out there. Life itself was hard enough without the monosynaptic sociopaths preying on folks. What I realized right then and there was that I'd made gross errors in how I approached dealing with Mirax's disappearance. When I joined the Jedi Academy, I abandoned much of who I had been. I had a new name, a new look, a new identity, and I was learning new things. I was trying to become someone I was not because I believed that only someone more powerful than me, a Jedi, could ever possibly save Mirax. When the Jedi Academy proved disappointing and I fled, I returned to my roots. I pitched away what I had learned and even missed what my grandfather had given me and the information he'd preserved. I even misinterpreted the dream as one predicting disaster if I tried to be a Jedi, but that wasn't the message of the dream at all. The message of that dream was as simple as it was stark. Selflessness is the only antidote to evil. It provides the light that destroys the dark. At first I had divorced myself from my Corsac past. Then I divorced myself from my Jedi heritage in favor of my Corsac training. I was treating my identities as if Corsac and Jedi were left and right, as if I could possibly function with only one side of my body or the other. I was making half of myself oppose the other half, when I should have integrated both halves. I was not Corran Horn of Corsac or Kieran Halcyon Jedi Knight. I was both of them. I needed to unify myself and my efforts. Certainly, just as my grandfather had described Najah, often not letting it be known that he was a Jedi, there were times when one approach would work better than the other, but I had to be able to use both if I planned to succeed. The Invidious got us back to Corcus relatively swiftly, and I was shuttled down with Eligos halfway through the unloading of the survivors' share of the bounty yielded up by careless warehouses. I could have gone down sooner, but I stayed in the Invidious to see to it that my squadron got off in good order, and to find out from Colonel Gert what she'd heard in the way of rumors running around through the ship's crew. She didn't say she heard much, but she recommended I start physical training, aiming to improve my stamina and vigor as much as possible. By the time I got down to Vlarna and to the hotel suite I raided, given my rank, I discovered it had been visited in my absence. A variety of luxury goods had been delivered to my rooms, including some century-old Savarine brandy and a matching decanter and snifter set. The bottle and 4 glasses had been decorated with exotic gemstones, including a Durand fire jewel the size of my thumbnail. Bolts of exotic fabric, statuettes from various worlds, and a variety of preserved foodstuffs had been loaded into my rooms, along with a holograph from Tavira wishing me a quick and strong recovery. I smiled. A mere dozen hours before now, this display would have impressed me and flattered me. I would have felt that I had her right where I wanted her, too, that I had trapped her into devoting so much energy to winning me that she'd never see how much I was fooling her. I would have poured a glass of the brandy, toasted her defeat, and tossed it off triumphantly. Now I just saw a pile of things that had been stolen from others. She had no right to any of this, and giving it to me, giving me things she did not own and had not worked to earn, had no value. She took what she wanted, and while she thought she wanted me to come to her voluntarily, the fact was she'd have from me what she'd wanted or she'd have me destroyed. Her gesture was as hollow as she was amoral, and that just made my decision to deal with her that much more important and imperative. Elagos returned to the suite's parlor after having completed a circuit through the bedroom, refresher station, and food preparation station. There is much more elsewhere, including things suggesting a fair amount of intimacy in the refresher station and bedroom. In her fondest dreams, Elagos. I gave him a confident smile. We've got a month. In that time, I intend to become her worst nightmare. Good. I applaud your decision. The Kamasi clapped his hands together and smiled. I should add, I think it is one worthy of even your grandfather. Whoa. That is shocking and a cliffhanger, but I like the introduction of this new character who's obviously going to become very important. And also, I like that it seems like Corran has reached the turning point here. He almost, not only did he almost, go down to the dark side by falling for Tavira and all that, but it seems like maybe he's finally going to learn to, as he said, put the two halves of him together, the Jedi and the police security officer, becoming a full person, integrating those two parts. What's coming up with that is where the book gets really cool towards the end, in my opinion. But that is all for today, obviously. So we will see you next time for more of I, Jedi, getting close to the end.